Hi, okay. All right, hi, I'm Brandale Randolph from the 1854 Cycling Company. How are you guys doing? Great. So everyone's here because they're into cycling and all these other great things. And so, how many of you have heard about the company prior to the article or any of the other thing that was written, anything else that was written about it? Probably no one. Well, I'm here to tell you that that's true for most things. My life over the last 2 months has been hectic. So I'm going to talk about what I've learned so far. This is a presentation that I've given a couple of times, and I just wanted to kind of reiterate who we are, what we do, and why we do it. So let's take it away. So to get started, this is a picture of me in 2008. There are a lot of people who come from cycling backgrounds. They've always loved cycling. Their dad was a mechanic, their granddad was a mechanic, their great granddad built wheels, et cetera, et cetera. I am not from that sort of background. I was a trader. And this was me at my commodities brokerage hedge fund that I worked at in 2008. And when the Bernie Madoff scandal happened, it shook me out of the entire industry. So I was looking for what it is I want to do with my life, and I kind of ended up searching for some sort of meaning. And so I ended up moving to Lubbock, Texas, because my wife was pursuing her PhD in entrepreneurship at Texas Tech. While there, I could not find a commodities brokerage firm.
I didn't love it. Yeah, I get that.
Oh, so you know what Haboob is, right?
What's that?
And Haboob.
What?
Haboob. Okay. In Lubbock, there's these. Everywhere else there's a dust storm, right? And Haboob is when a wall of dirt comes at you like it's a sci-fi movie and it just sweeps across the entire plain. That's called an haboob. It happens in certain places in the Middle East and in Lubbock, Texas. And it covers everything with dirt. Matter of fact, it spits mud when it rains. That's how like crazy it is. So you walk outside, there's mud on your car. So that's. But while I was there, I needed something to do. And one of my passions is poverty. It's one of my things because I believe there are two different levels to it. There's the people who are struggling. There's people who are on the bubble. But then there's the people who are on the bubble who have this thing called hidden poverty, where you may not know. It's a check-to-check kind of existence. And so what I do was I look at poverty and I define it by 30 different aspects. And it defines poverty as it's different from it would be in West Philadelphia than Southfield, or even Camden. But you look at these 30 different aspects, how people get jobs, what population is affected, et cetera, and you end up with a study of which populations are most affected and dragged down by poverty and who is on the bubble. And I started an organization called Project Poverty to sort of attack and address these populations in Lubbock. The first population here was just kids. No, I'm kidding. These are just kids in low income, and I would teach financial literacy there. I went to inside the Lubbock County Detention Center, and these are low-level offenders who may or may not be able to pay restitution. So they're in and out, and their parole violation is primarily their failure to pay restitution because it's hard to find work in order to pay back what you owe prior to. So if you had a DUI or something of that nature, you couldn't pay it after a couple of months, you went. And then this is a picture from me in a juvenile detention center. What I was teaching, this wasn't really juvenile detention, this is kind of like transition. So these were foster kids who were about to be emancipated. So when they turned 18, they were about to join the world as adults. And the reason why a lot of those were dealing with poverty is because no one taught them things like the basics of living in a household, managing a budget, shopping in a grocery store. Simple things that we take for granted, how to apply for work, those kind of things. So I would teach that. And also, here's another hidden group. These are called the chronically unemployed. They don't have trouble finding work. They have trouble keeping jobs because the big box retailers typically hire 20 people to only keep 2 after a 90-day probationary period. So what about the other 18? They in these cycles of unemployment. So every 3-4 months they end up unemployed. So what the workforce readiness had me come in and do was teach them other skills to passing the 90-day window. And so these were populations in Lubbock that were affected by poverty. And through that work, I was actually given a TED Talk through Texas Tech University called Stop Throwing Breakfast Sandwiches at the Poor. And what that was about This is a cool story where I talked about ineffective poverty alleviation tactics, to where we do things for people who are in poverty, but we don't ask them what they need. And I did a TED talk about that. It's been viewed quite a bit. And then, of course, during the writing of one of my books, I came across this stat, and it shook me to my core. It says that 2/3 of released prisoners were rearrested for a new crime in 3 years, and 76.6% are rearrested within 5 years of their initial release. What this means is simply that people who are released from jail, 75% of them will go back within 5 years. So the question I always had is, what are the other 24% doing that the 75% aren't doing? And that was a question that kind of plagued my head. So I started doing the research and looking at it and trying to figure it out. And I figured out what it was there are 3 factors that keep someone from not going back to jail once they get out. Supportive household. No matter, this spans across income levels. The second is skill in demand trade. So if they have a job skill that's in demand, for instance, they're a carpenter, they are a automotive technician who can work on cars that are specially built, and also the third skill is education. The more educated an ex-offender is, the least likely they are to go back, because they're able to process and learn. So the other 76% people are kind of like out there doing their thing. It kind of shook me to my core. But what happened was my wife is now a professor at Babson College. So she's a tenure track professor of entrepreneurship in Babson. So I moved to Massachusetts, where we are now, and settled in a town called Framingham, which is 20 miles outside of Boston. And the interesting thing about this is that when I got there, I didn't really want to do the nonprofit thing anymore. Because one of the things I learned through Project Poverty was that the people who make a real impact on other people's lives aren't necessarily the people who do the seminars, the webinars, the job, whatever. It's the people who actually hand them the check that they take home to put food on the table. Those are the people who have the most impact on those people's lives. That's why if a formerly incarcerated person works at Walmart, and Walmart jerks them around with 37 hours of employment per week, they won't give them 40 so they can get benefit. That affects their lives. So no matter what seminar job stuff I do to help them get a job, to keep a job, if they can't have the benefits and the other things that come with the employment that they need to get in order to take care of their families for the most part, what have I done? So I pretty much wanted to start my own business, but I'm also in 3 ways, a couple other things. I also write books on poverty. This is one called Like Haven and Quell, Beyond Income and Mindset. I'm also an activist. Something that hasn't been written about in many of the articles was that my younger brother was killed in 2005 by the Los Angeles Police Department. And we sued in federal court, and we settled out of court. But it was one of the first such those incidents way before Black Lives Matter and all that stuff that happened to me. So this was a vigil in Framingham that I attended. But the wonderful thing I found out about Framingham was the rich history that it had. And this in particular struck my attention. And this here was a flyer for an anti-slavery rally that happened in Framingham on the 4th of July in 1854. The reason why the 1854 date is significant is because that was the first year of the second worst president in history, Franklin Pierce, who brought back the Fugitive Slave Act. And Massachusetts in particular had outlawed slavery in 1826. So 30 years later, here we are snatching black people off the street and taking them back to slavery. This year in 1854, they took a young man named Anthony Burns, who had escaped from slavery at 16. He was now 19. And they took him back to slavery, but it started a whole riot, and people were up in arms about it. And so the hypocrisy of celebrating the 4th of July while your African-American citizens lived in terror of being snatched off the streets was noted by several noted abolitionists. In particular, Henry David Thoreau. That's where, I mean, you read Slavery in Massachusetts? That was the speech he did here. Sojourner Truth was there. Wendell Pierce was there. And then there was a man by the name of William Lloyd Garrison. Garrison had a newspaper called The Liberator, and this was the first anti-slavery document that was there. And so at this rally, he started doing a couple of things, and at the end of his speech, he took out the U.S. Constitution and he burned it. It's because he burned the Constitution at this rally in Framingham, and that set off all kinds of massive outrage, kind of like Colin Kaepernick kneeling in 1854. So it split and divided the country, but it started off the abolitionist movement right there. And I just thought it was an amazing story to tell and to have the history of the town brought up. But then, so I wanted to commemorate it with something else. So I have this other thing, which is that if I see this population in Framingham that is struggling, and who is the most affected population in Framingham that was struggling was women who have criminal background histories. Not only was that like a good group, or I'm sorry, a good sizable majority of the people who were struggling with poverty there, but they also had children under the age of 18. There was a large majority who had children under the age of 18. So I started thinking it through. If I can put a living wage check in their pockets, this puts coats on those babies. If I can create a company that can actually have in-demand careers, focuses, and things that are viable, that can also not only sustain them for 1 or 2 years or whatever, but for a lifetime as a career as they take these children on through college, that would be amazing and awesome. I didn't know what that was going to be. I toyed around with a lot of other ideas and things, but what happened was kind of organic and serendipity. My wife was like, okay, you're thinking way too hard on this. Go work out, go do something, just take your mind off it, go do something. So I went and worked out, I tried running, but it got cold really quickly in Boston, and I'm not built for this. And so I was like, you know what, let me go and try riding a bike. So I was gonna go buy a cheap bike or whatever. I don't like Walmart because of their practices, and so that kind of thing. So I went to a bike shop and I didn't see anything that I liked. So I had them custom build me one. It was this cool thing that had leather pointed this and leather pointed that. It was really cool. And as he was building, other customers came in and said, can you make me one of those too? I was like, wow, we may have a business here. So I thought about it, I did the research, and I started looking at bike building and assembly and having a brand that can actually represent all of this stuff. I started digging into it, and 1854 was born. So it's kind of an amalgamation of all the things I love all into one, thing, and it's taken off. So the first thing we did was there weren't a lot of people who could afford the bikes that we were building at first, so we made hoodies and t-shirts that had the word abolitionist on it. And as noted, they went around the world. This was at the Women's March right after the first president was elected. Then we have a couple of other, and we made stuff for the babies as well. These took off at such a pace that it helped me start building the business up. And this was in 2016. We started moving and doing all this stuff, and earlier this year we were doing some great stuff. But then something miraculous happened. And what year is this? February of 2016, Ebony found me. And they wrote an article on who we are and what we're going to do. And this was the first national publication of anything that we do, and talked about this whole quest. And so people started to find out who we were. But I had a huge problem. I had this bike that people had not quite loved, because I did not know that most of you cyclists are vegan. And so you don't really want to touch whole grain, full grain leather. So I had this bike that I invested all this time and effort, energy, and money into that no one really, it was beautiful, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't going to be the carrier and vehicle for which I've been launching business. So we started getting in demand, and that's this bike right here. It's our first Garrison. It's not upstairs, we have the second Garrison upstairs. But that bike right there actually launched a lot of great things. And so we developed 2 more bikes. And these were our next generation bikes. These are called the Crafts. These bikes, like all my other bikes, are named after abolitionists. This bike, this Craft Racer, Craft City, and the Crafts, William and Ellen Craft, they have a very interesting story as abolitionists as well. She posed as a white slave owner because she was fair-skinned, and he, her servant. And they pretended to have lost their ticket from Macon, Georgia, and they made their way through steamships and trains and all those things, all the way up to freedom. And when they got to Boston, they stayed with a man named Lewis Hayden. And when the authorities came to arrest them, Lewis Hayden said, "My shop is full of gunpowder. And if you come in here, I will blow it up and we will all die." And then he safely ushered them that night over into live in Europe. They came back in 1854 just for the slavery route. And so I want to honor their legacy by naming bikes after them. So these are the Crafts. They're upstairs. They're wonderful. But when these bikes arrived, it actually created a huge identity for us. Because now we had a bike that the general public can actually accept. And it was a fixed gear, single speed, steel frames, and it had a look and design that was sort of unique in all of us. But the thing about these bikes that I love is that these are the bikes we can teach women how to build. These are not just bikes that we want to identify with. Those formerly incarcerated women, we're teaching them how to build these bikes in framing. So when these bikes get purchased, they're actually working with master techs and learning how to put on the screws, the bottom brackets, and all those other things to build these bikes. And this is where we started, this is where we are now, and this is how the company is actually starting to grow. So what has happened over the last couple of months has been amazing. So let me go through this and I'll tell you what has happened. So this here was a photo shoot that was done in Boston with the Artrex brand. Anyone know Artrex? You know Artrex, right? They make outdoor clothing. This is their bicycle commuter line of clothing, and they use our bikes as bike shirt, in their photo shoot. And so we gave them bikes, and they put them in their ads, and these ads are going to be used in the spring again. They're going to redo them. And so we have that line, and it got us a lot of attention. We got some sales out. These will also be posted in their stores too, behind the actual clothing and on some of the hang tags. So we're really happy with that. They heard about us and they use us in their ads. So. And we also started delivering bikes too. This was a cool thing that we did. This is a couple in New York. He bought his and her Crafts in the very color. These are the Cohens, and they loved it. And so what we did with this is that they are the beginning of a movement online to post your bikes on social media. I barely know them, so they're posting on social media, hashtagging 1854, cycling, et cetera, and through that, we've gotten a lot of pictures from people who just have our bikes, love them, put them on social media, gets lots of hits, and that kind of got us out there. Okay, so that's my wife and my two workers here. So I just got in there, but yeah, those are mine. Yeah, he's kind of swagging out my little 4-year-old. So, this was a local paper in Framingham that talked about what we're trying to do. Now, the link here that was discussed here is something that I haven't discussed so far. When slavery was abolished after the Civil War, it wasn't totally abolished. It was moved to the prisons through the 13th Amendment. And so if we do this analogy between slavery and prison, going in and out of prison is like going in and out of slavery in so many senses, if we really think about it. And it crosses racial lines and everything else. And I made that statement. Now, the interesting thing about me publicly making this statement is it now officially ties my company to abolition and what we have to do. There's no more ways I can just get a bunch of robots to make my bike, to assemble my bikes. There's no way I can do a lot of this stuff. And I'm also, and I have to, but I love the fact that they did this and put me on the front page, because now everyone locally knows who I am and what I'm trying to do. And so that was an amazing article. And so we delivered bikes to China, me and my other worker. But there's a dark side to all of this, and this is what I want to talk about because I know we have a lot of social justice people in the room. When you have a social entrepreneurship business, half of it is also business. And business, no matter who you are and how great and noble your cause is difficult. Especially in today's climate, where we have bike shops that are closing left and right, we have competition from Amazon, we have the cheap bikes at Walmart, we have the cheap bikes at Target, we have people who can make their bikes for $40 a pop and have them fully assembled and everything and brought straight from China to here, and this is the things that kind of plague us. And so with that in mind, I had a conundrum. Hold on. My conundrum was this. This is what my Venn diagram basically looks like right now. How do I make a profit as a business? Environmentally, bikes and bike making is a very, especially steel bikes, is a very dirty, like EPA will just shut me down for doing steel because of all the toxic waste that comes out of the fumes and everything else. So is it environmentally friendly to build bikes? That's one of the things. And socially, I have this mission now that I'm tied to. I really want to help this population, and I really want to create great living wage jobs with benefits and other kind of things there. And the company has survived. There have been other bike brands that have come and gone over the last few years because they've had to fight this thing. And so there are some options that I gave myself in this Venn diagram. I can either make cheap bikes and still go on mission. I could do carbon fiber bikes, which are very environmentally friendly. They're much more environmentally friendly than steel right now. I could switch to a nonprofit. I'm a for-profit. I'm not a 501c3. I'm a for-profit, and I can just do all this on donations, et cetera, et cetera. And I could do a pre-release training grant. So what did I choose to do? Interesting. I went to China. So what happened was that my cargo bike was taking a lot longer than it should because I wanted to do an efficient cargo bike that was steel. But when I went to China, I had a good fortune of timing. How many people know about the Chinese bike share crisis that's going on right now, or just occurred? Oh, so you know about it?
Husband's Chinese, so we travel there a lot and follow what's going on.
Oh, so you know, right?
Yeah.
So basically the company that I was waiting on the sample from like months and months and months was directed by the Chinese government to be part of their million bike share making thing. However, the problem is that brands like mine, who could not wait for their samples and things like that to come in, were starting to abandon the fleet. So 2 weeks before I arrived, the Chinese government shut it down because people were leaving these bikes all the way around town. But these were dockless bikes. These weren't docked bikes that we have here. They were dockless, so they were just stripping them of all their parts, getting them in all these places, and piling them up and throwing them in the river, and all the stuff that was going on. And imagine, we only have, in these major cities, what, 1,000 bikes? Imagine 300,000 bikes like they had in Shanghai. So imagine just littered with bikes everywhere. And then competing companies had bikes. Companies that weren't even part of the Chinese government were making bikes for bike share. All this stuff was going on. So all these companies were stranded because you still have to do what they say. So when I got there, it was just amazing because I had no expectations of what goes on in China. I didn't know their factories were clean and environmentally safe and friendly. They had no child labor and all this other low-wage stuff because other countries demand that if they're going to do products there, they have to operate their factories a certain way. We don't, but other countries do. So therefore, you go in their factories and it looks like a normal American manufacturing factory, and they actually have to pay a certain wage as well. So it's really amazing. But I ended up with something that actually flipped my head. It's upstairs. This is a carbon fiber electric mountain bike. And what gave me the vision when I saw it was that these women who I'm bringing in can learn how to build and repair this bike. What if we taught e-bike training to formerly incarcerated women? What if we sold e-bikes that they actually assembled and repaired, because this comes in like 400 pieces. So what if we can actually do that? They will then become an in-demand labor pool. Because I don't believe in the next 10, 20 years there's gonna be enough people to repair electric bikes. I don't think there's gonna be enough people to handle carbon fiber. And I believe that if we were able to do that, we as a company would not only survive, but we'll stay on mission, but we can also create growth, strength, and everything else we need for our company to thrive. But yeah, this is our electric mountain bike, and it gave me a beautiful idea to do that and bring it back here. So that kind of concludes everything that I want to say about the company and where we're headed. So right now, just to give you an idea of what's happened. Last month, Bloomberg magazine did an article on us. How many people read it or saw it? There was Bloomberg did an article in 1854, which was sent around the world. It was really amazing, and we ended up getting orders from all over the world. We now have orders from Sweden, Italy, Germany, France, Canada, and one in Sao Paulo, Brazil. So we're now getting big, and of course, lots of domestic orders. But it's so much so that a lot of my help could not come to Philly with me. That's how crazy it is. They had to work this weekend to actually help me fulfill some of these orders. And what I actually added to that whole mix of my mission now, because something else happened in the course of all this. When I first started in June, there was a friend of mine who owned a bicycle shop in downtown Cambridge, and they've since closed. At first, when I first did this, I wanted to have and sell all my bikes online. I wanted to do it that way, but I don't want to do it that way anymore. I want to put my bikes in the shops of local independent dealers. I want my bikes in those shops because not only could you explain it, but if I can help drive some traffic to your shop with all this notoriety and stuff I can get, then it's a mutual ecosystem that begins to grow. So when I got the call from the Bicycle Retailer Industry News about doing an article, I actually told them that that's what I like. And so the reason why I'm here is because I want to talk to bicycle shops about putting my products in their shops, because I want to save my friend's shop. I wanted to save it, but I didn't. But I think that if we could create this other ecosystem to where these products are in their shops, and it's unique, it's not online, you have to come here to get it, or you go to my website and it'll say our bikes are located at these various dealers and it has a list there. That's what I prefer. I don't want to have this sort of situation where I can actually sell them on Amazon or all these other things, because I don't think that's where we're going to get quality. I believe the quality comes in having an ecosystem of retailers. And so that's where we are today. We're still a little bit far from opening our own facility. We need some more funds. That's going to be demand. But a lot of that is also based on if we can get enough distribution. So if we can get the shops, we can get the money to open our facility, to hire, bring in, and do all the things we need to do prior to the release this spring. Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
So where are you assembling the bikes now?
We're in a warehouse downtown Framingham. We have I think I want to say 8,000 square feet. 8,000 square feet. I have 4 or 5 master techs and a small pool of pre-release people to come in.
So are your master techs women, or
2 out of the 4 are.
were they formerly incarcerated?
No.
Okay.
No,
But
'cause
they'll be training.
they'll be training the
women.
women are, yeah. And then we'll be moving up to other stuff, because what we want to do with them, my master techs now, is to start training toward design. Because one of the things I really want to do, and over the next 5 years, is design our own frames and have our own engineers design. Well, we want to do our own carbon fiber layup. We want to do all these things ourselves, and I want to move the master techs up. So, but to do that, they got to have people to be in their place. So this first group of women is going to get trained, are eventually going to do that, become certified. We're going to have the money to send them to schools to get certified, et cetera, et cetera. And then they can become the master techs. And then those 4 that we have move up a step. We go from there. Yes,
So how many employees do you have now?
6.
The 4 master techs and how many people are doing all this?
Me, those 2 little boys you saw,
they're yours?
Been there, done that.
they're mine, and the 4 other master techs, you know, but they're not my employees. But the other 2 are like part timers that just help me out with graphics, the website, and other stuff that we need to have.
And how many women are coming in?
But they're just doing screws, tightening, watching stuff right now because our facility isn't safe enough to bring in more than 6. But what we're trying to work out with Middlesex County is a way in which to having 1 or 2 per day. So we'll see, like, and then working with them in order to have a safe transition reentry program. The other thing that I was approached with via the Bloomberg article was a holistic kind of reentry system where we add mental health therapists and other people, maybe child trauma people in our facility who work for us as employees that help them deal with their issues outside of work. And so that's something that we're really considering. And if we do raise the funds that we need to raise in order to get this done, we are going to do that. So when I moved from an 8,000 square foot spot to 30,000 square feet, I promised to dedicate at least 4,000 to just that. Because I believe that if I take care of my employees in that way and their families, then the entire community gets better. I mean, so it creates this entire ecosystem, and I would love to do that. Yes, ma'am.
So I just want to know, is there any form of, are you doing any coalition building with like other grassroots organizations out there or like nonprofits? Because when you mentioned that, like having like some type of like health related like access
Yes.
to your company, and have you ever thought about like linking up with other nonprofits or things like that are doing that type of work?
Yes. Yes. We have a few in Framingham that are there already. Like the prison is they have 4 detention centers that I'm trying to work with, but they have programs that they work with already that assist that. And so we're going through the prisons to kind of link up with people that are already linked up to actually bring this into another way. But the grassroots, like you said, are vital because they have people in some of these things that could not work in other organizations, but know the population very, very well. And I am still building those coalitions amongst other things. Like, for instance, one in particular that I'm trying to link up with is from the Cape Cod down southern Massachusetts area, that's been hit with the opioid crisis really, really hard. Opioid, heroin, other, habituates, like that community got ravaged with that stuff. But they have people who are very well trained because a lot of the women in that were drugged into all kinds of other things and they were incarcerated for possession and other things. That is a whole other type of thing. But they need work as well. They're not disabled. They're not, so mentally incapacitated that they can be designated over here. So I may end up with these women on my staff. Not on my staff, but on my payroll, on my team. They may be building bikes one day, handling power tools and everything else. So I need to make sure that they are well taken care of and surrounded with comfort, and we have a supporting community for them as well. And so I definitely believe that's going to be possible. That's the kind of stuff I do want to work with long term. Yes.
In Pennsylvania, in the Harrisburg area, we have like 4 halfway houses. They have meetings where groups like us go there and meet all the other holistic groups helping. So there might be one lady doing the education, somebody else doing the health, and the state brings together a conference inside the detention center. So they hold them periodically. So
yeah, I just did a one for the Suffolk County House of Corrections with those pathways to promises and with Project Place, and they're the ones that teach job skills to women who are about to be incarcerated. And we did the mock interviews. So we went in with women and they were still in their jumpsuits, and we did their interviews as if we were going to hire them as employers and gave them backgrounds in their resume, how to speak to people, look them in the eye, all that stuff. But it was with a group of other companies like mine who were willing to hire them and pay them living wages. It was amazing. And the other thing I'll say too is that the talent pool was amazing. You typically think that formerly incarcerated people had no skills, no job levels, no experience. Not even the case. There were people who had, there were paralegals. There were a couple of women who had done shipping and freight and logistics. There was a woman who had, her dad was an auto mechanic. And she had actually gone to school for it before. It was all these skills. There was actually a computer tech person there. And they just got caught up in minor league, low level, nonviolent offenses. And here they were. 6 months out, 6 months in, whatever, here they were. Smart people with college degrees, et cetera, et cetera. So all these stereotypes about what the prison labor pool looks like, not even real. It's not even relevant or remotely true. I mean, I think the movies have desensitized us towards an imagining of what this population is like that it's really completely not. But I agree that the coalition building happens and the prisons are a great source of that. And people look over them, but they have the state funding and federal funding to do this, and they must use our funds to do that. So, any other thoughts and ideas and questions?
One more question. Okay, so as far as like if you want to tweet about this, or like you go up and you take a photograph and you put it on Instagram. So is it like the hashtag?
It's 1854 cycling.
Okay.
Hashtag abolitionists. Well, you can hashtag them both, but at least 1854 cycling.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one that they're using now. So.
All right.
Yes.
Have you thought about, is there any federal or state funding that you can get because you're providing jobs for formerly incarcerated people? Have you explored those avenues? I know it comes with a lot of strings.
It comes with a lot of strings that I haven't had a chance to write grants and other stuff like that with, because that takes a lot of time. But I'm working with a lot of people who get those dollars as well. A lot of those grassroots groups who are probably underfunded, they have to compete with the larger groups who get the funding every year. We have to compete and then write grants to them to get smaller funds. So I'm writing grants. I want to write grants and pursue with the bigger guys who do this, and so we can generate the funds to do this. But there's a tech grant that I want to look at as well. It's a women in the technology space, because we are training e-bikes and manufacturing and those kind of things that I do want to pursue and look at. But if I did have the money, I would hire someone to explore these options full time. That would just be their job to explore how we can get funds to do all this full time.
So do you have a nonprofit arm of your company then, or?
No. I was thinking about it, but after going through Project Poverty and all the stuff and strings that we went through as a nonprofit, I kind of didn't want to this time.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it is something that I do want to look into later on.
I think that's I had like two maybe comments about this. One, when I think of the word social justice, right, I think about what transformation looks like, and then what the root causes are, and I think that we live in a model in a society where we're very retroactive, right? We want to deal with the issue, but we want to deal with something that happened, but not necessarily the issue.
Yes.
But I think maybe, a suggestion would be, how do we do some youth, so before they go into jail, how do we do that education, that building with young people? That's why I brought my daughter here, right? So before, because I was.
I have a hat for you if you want to come up to my booth.
But so I say that because I think it's we got to start looking at social justice from a framework of not necessarily like this capitalism that there is a lot of that in the presentation, but really of what does social equality look like on a grassroots level. So before they go into jail, what are we doing to really deal with those issues as companies, right? And people who might be a stakeholder and looking at how society is fueled. So that's one thinking about maybe in the future, how do you get young ladies, right? Because kids get in trouble, they go to jail between hours in 3 and 6.
Yeah, 3 and 6.
So that's another idea. But another thing is just thinking about, I love I'll be honest, like for me, when there's no nonprofit arm, it makes me really, makes me think, around the intentionality when for-profits, a la charter schools or whatever, want to run institutions or programs, what does that mean? So I don't know, just I think the framework, like I'm here to, get you to think about the framing and the language I think is important.
So 3 things. One about the nonprofit arm. Nonprofit arm, for me, would be things that I want to do because this kind of ties into my thoughts about capitalism. When I think about capitalism, I think about it as a tool. I don't look at it as as a system, et cetera, et cetera. For instance, capitalism exists in two spaces. So to give you a good analogy, I think of capitalism like a block of wood. Some people see this block of wood and it's something that's been beating people over the head with for years. Here's a block of wood. And all I know this block of wood as is something that beats me and the people I know over the head. Other people see this as something to build with, because you've known communities that have been built with this. You know that there are communities in other countries at foregone times where they've used capitalism to rebuild their communities. And I say, if I can do something, I want to do it to rebuild my community, because I think about, I'm going to a different space now. I think about places like Tulsa, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street, how they had this whole eco-structure that built their community. I think about things like the Civil Rights Movement, the people who actually had businesses that actually helped fund a lot of things that Dr. King and a lot of other people were doing, who owned the hotels, who owned the funeral homes, who owned the ability to get them to fly back and forth to all these places. I want to be that. I want to be the person who actually donates the money for the scholarship. And that's kind of why I wanted to do this, not to get my own Aston Martin, but to change the world through this form of that. But in terms of social justice, I believe that social justice suffers because it's not well funded, or funded by corporations that are willing to stand up for social justice. Like I said earlier, my younger brother was killed by the Los Angeles Police Department in 2005. I would love to fund the families who are victims and who suffer from this post these tragedies. I would love to to have the money to send for college funds for the children who are left behind. That's why I'm in business. I'm not trying to do the nonprofit work and all these other things. But
or maybe that never happens.
It never happens.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe your brother didn't have to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's
Yeah.
true. It's
Exactly.
definitely that you got to see where I'm coming from. There.
And
There's also
I
maybe
see
that
it.
shouldn't happen. And a big part around capitalism is like the people who are making these bikes, can they afford the bikes? Right?
Exactly.
That's the issue.
And that is my biggest issue, because when I was in China, I saw people who could not afford it and people who could. Because there's this no middle class thing they have there, and there's a city called Hangzhou City. I don't know if you guys know it, but it's the home of Alibaba, which is Amazon's Chinese rival, and it is brand new. The entire city is brand new. We're talking protected bike lanes all over town. We're talking every brand, make, and model has a flagship store in this city. And it's not Shanghai, it's Hangzhou City in the middle of, we think, nowhere. So there are these people who can afford Benzes and Mercedes and everything else. And then there's the people who come right out of the country who are bathing in the river. And what I don't want to do is have a $3,000 bike that my employees cannot afford. I want them to say, you know what? I could afford that if I want to, or I could go buy a house, or I can save money to do this and save money to do this. But if I can't, my children will be able to, because we're going to set that foundation. We're going to reset that entire foundation, because I saw workers build themselves up in those countries. They had left the farms and whatever, gotten these jobs that we don't think is paying well, but it's enough to afford a cost of living in that city. And their living wage is different than our living wage, but their living is really living. But we don't have corporations that are willing to do that as much so. I also want to do things like profit sharing, but this is all down the road. For right now, I got to establish the building. Yes, ma'am.
Hey, so I thought that you brought up the gentleman in the front, interesting point. So at the beginning of your presentation, when you said, I thought it was really good how you listed, recidivism and what are some leading causes. So, not having education, or, so people who have a higher education level are less likely to go back to prison. People who have, a supportive family are also less likely to go back, and someone who has, an employable trade. So I felt, and then also, I think that having a parent having a job and making a living wage is also very important to like you said, having the money to put coats on kids' themselves out of poverty. And then also I just want to say, like, I used to work in a nonprofit, so like there's also like this whole like nonprofit industrial complex going on, and so sometimes even those people who are in nonprofits like don't have like the best intention, and also like people also like who are working in nonprofits also have to like think about like I'm getting like I don't know. There's also like this tie like this is my income, and so that also like screws things up, and the people that they serve, and like the people who are often like higher up are like often like well-off white people, and then they're like working from the top down. So like I feel like
But how do we change that? You know,
like,
I'm asking you that question. How do you change that? How do we change that?
Oh,
Part
no,
of, like,
but-
nonprofits and then capitalism, and like how to like get to some place in the middle where it does work, and we like approach things from a less reactive. Because I feel like a lot of nonprofits approach from a reactive standpoint instead of like approach.
And I will address both those points. How we get there is simply this. We need people like you to be you within your company. What makes, well, I have this other thing I want to say, and I don't want to keep going on with stories and things like that. There's something different in all of us that makes us tick. We all have different causes that we appreciate, different things. Social justice often becomes a little kid's soccer game. Wherever the ball goes, all the activists go. So if it's about this week, they're all over here. It's about this week, they're all over here. But we're most effective when everyone stays and plays their role. If your role is educating children prior to all this stuff and incarceration, that's where we need you. My role is here, her role is here, we have the environmentalists over here. But we create an ecosystem amongst us. Do you see? But if you don't have a company that's led by you, inspired by you, that's based on your mission, your passion, your whatever, then how can we create this ecosystem? If you have a great ecosystem, but these people have nowhere to work, there's no place to send them to where they can get a living wage, a good job, and a skilled trade. If this job is great, but no one is buying the bikes, if they're not being distributed amongst all these other little places, then what good is that? If no one's riding the bikes, if no one's writing about the bikes, if no one even owns a t-shirt, what good is it? This is why I'm here, to see if we can help create this ecosystem amongst all of us and all the things that we do in terms of social justice. So when I hear from someone who has a grassroots facility or has an environmental issue, I can pass them to you. I know people to do this. And you know a person that will hire them and give them a living wage. Anything else? My booth is 2037. I invite you all to come. I'm giving out free hats, free baseball caps. So if you want to come and just get one, see, and also my personal business card, I'll give it to you all when I see you upstairs. I'm sorry I left some of that stuff upstairs, but I had to rush down and make sure my presentation was ready. All right. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for